We are now only a matter of weeks away from Cyberpunk 2077's release. This is something that we've all been waiting for a very long time. And I think before it comes out, we should go through some of the things that you must know about Cyberpunk before you actually buy it. If you do want to see me playing this game live the second that it does drop, we will be doing daily videos, so make sure that you're subscribed to this channel. On top of that, we will be streaming over on Twitch daily, so if you would like to see that, link to that can be found in the description down below. Also, if you do want to keep up to date with everything Cyberpunk, we do also have a Discord channel where it's so much easier to post the latest news compared to actually recording a video. Link to that can also be found in the description. As for this video, we will be going over a number of different things. Some of the things we've talked about quite a bit on this channel. So to save me at the end of every single topic saying that there's links in the description down below, if you are interested in anything that I've talked about and you want to find out a bit more information about it, links to absolutely everything can be found in the description. First thing is the release date. I said we are only a couple weeks away, and I say this because previously we haven't been too far away from Cyberpunk, but it was then delayed. Originally, it was supposed to come out in April, that got pushed all the way back to September, and then September got all the way pushed back to November. So this is technically the third time that we're getting close to playing Cyberpunk, but it is by far the closest we've ever been. And because we're only a matter of weeks away, we've seen CD Projekt Red talk about a mandatory crunch time for the employees, and we're starting to see a number of different adverts go up on TV about Cyberpunk. It's fair to say that the 19th of November is set in stone, and that will not be changing. So if you've been hidden under a rock for God knows how long, maybe a couple years, and you've never heard about Cyberpunk and the amount of hype around it, but you've just somehow seen an advert on TV and you're wondering a bit more about Cyberpunk, there's the release date, 19th of November. This brings us on to the second point. A lot of you guys that are based in Europe as well as a few other countries, you would notice that the 19th of November is also the release date for the PlayStation 5. And there may be a slight fear in whether or not you actually pre-order it based on Xbox One or even PlayStation 4, because in a matter of weeks or even on the exact same day, you have next-gen consoles coming out. But there's no need to worry because CD Projekt Red have said to themselves, if you pre-order the PlayStation 4 or the Xbox One edition, you will be able to get a free upgrade to PlayStation 5 or Xbox Series X. So you can pre-order your edition now for Cyberpunk, and you will just be getting a free upgrade the second that you go to PlayStation 5 or Xbox Series X. I should point out that if you pre-order it on PlayStation 4, you will not be able to get it on Xbox Series X, you'll have to buy it again. And likewise, if you buy it on Xbox One, you will not be able to get it on PlayStation 5, you will have to buy it again. But PlayStation 4 to PlayStation 5 will work, and also Xbox One to Xbox Series X will work. Number 3, we actually have the overall story. There's a lot of people that's looked into Cyberpunk but don't actually know the full story. And that's because there's a number of other stories around the main story. But the main story of Cyberpunk is based around a character called V, who is a mercenary and is on the hunt for a chip of immortality. We see this in the official 2019 E3 trailer. V and his best friend Jackie Wells were hired by Dexter Deshawn to get the chip of immortality. V was then betrayed by Dexter Deshawn and then thought to be dead until he wakes up with a vision of a legendary rocker, which is Johnny Silverhand. And V now possesses the chip of immortality. This is the basic story of Cyberpunk, but because this is an open world RPG, there are so many other little stories and side quests that can also link into this, as well as just also give you some more information about the world. And this brings us on to point number 4. I've just given a basic overview of the story, but you can also shape your own path by choosing life paths. The life paths include Nomad, Street Kid, and Corp. These are free options and will give you completely different introductions to the game, and these will have lasting effect on V throughout the rest of the game. This would mean if you were to select Nomad for your first playthrough, then go through your second playthrough and select Street Kid, you will have different benefits as well as disadvantages whilst playing the game. These life paths would also change your relationship with Jackie Wells. Jackie Wells does play a vital part within the story. He's V's best friend, but changing up the life path that you want would also change up how you first met Jackie Wells. In addition to choosing your backstory, which is the introduction to Cyberpunk, this also brings us on to point number 5. You can actually customize your character. This means changing to a male or female body type. changing the eyes, eye color, hairstyle, hair color, nose, mouth, jaw, ears, skin tone, scars, piercing, surface wiring, and even going as far as changing up your genitalia. Cyberpunk's customization is incredibly in-depth. I should also say that the customization isn't based on the slider of how big or how small you can make the body or certain body parts. It's actually based on different presets. This is the stuff that you can change up at the beginning for V's appearance. But when getting into the gameplay, you can also change up your cyberware, weapons, and even other items of clothing. So straight away, with the information that we know so far, you get to completely customize the character that you want. You can't change the name, but you can change the way that V looks. And then you can pick the backstory that you want, selecting one of the 3 life paths. Moving on to point number 6, Cyberpunk is a first-person RPG. Throughout the whole game, you cannot select a third-person view. The only time that you can do it is actually when you're in a vehicle. But the second that you get out of a vehicle and you're back controlling V, you are back to a first-person view. You will find sometimes there being a third-person cutscene, but CD Projekt Red have tried to fade out as many of these third-person cutscenes throughout the whole game. You may have already seen some of the trailers that have been released, maybe even some of the gameplay videos that were shown back in 2018 and maybe even 2019. And within those gameplay videos, you probably did see a third-person cutscene. So you might be kind of confused on this point. But recently, CD Projekt Red have said that they've tried to phase out as many of these third-person cutscenes because it just didn't feel right with the immersion. You go from a first-person view being V to all of a sudden looking at V. So now a lot of the third-person cutscenes are now first-person cutscenes. So hopefully that will clear up a bit of confusion. Moving on to point number 7. Cyberpunk has many years of lore backing it. This is not a game which CD Projekt Red have started from the ground and built it all the way up. There was already lore in place because this was a tabletop game back in the 1980s and has evolved since. Cyberpunk's universe is based off our universe, so major events that happen in the real world have also happened in Cyberpunk's world. There are a few things that happened in the 1800s within the Cyberpunk universe which starts to branch off of our universe. This is very small things at the beginning, with certain characters being born which later leads to prominent names within the Cyberpunk universe. But things really started to change in the Cyberpunk's universe within the 1980s, which later led to the stock market collapsing, president and also vice president being killed, and the eventual fall of the government. With there being no government in place to force restrictions on companies eventually got to a position of power where they controlled the whole world. Each country has its own story and lore of how things started and how things slowly changed. You also have lore back in different megacorps, of how they first started to how they're now controlling certain areas of the world. CD Projekt Red have even released a book called The World of Cyberpunk. This book has over 200 pages of lore where you can learn all about the history of the different districts in Night City, examine cybernetics, weapons, characters, and so much more. We did just mention it there with the districts, but moving on to point 8, the setting of Cyberpunk 2077 is Night City. Night City is a fictional city in the free state of Northern California. It's located on the west coast of the United States. The population is said to have around 6 million inhabitants across many different boroughs and makes it the most populated city in California. By 2077, the city was voted the worst place to live in America. Richard Knight, who is the founder of Night City, had an idea of a golden standard city. It wasn't actually going to be called Night City, originally it was going to be called Coronado City. But due to some unfortunate events that happened later on, Richard Knight was killed, and as tribute, the city changed its name to Night City to remember the founder who created it, Richard Knight. Moving on to point number 9, gangs. Night City is filled with a number of different gangs, and gangs play a massive part. Whilst playing Cyberpunk, you will encounter 10 different gangs, all of which have control of different locations. You have the 6th Street, the Animals, the Maelstrom gangs, the Scavengers, Tiger Claws, the Valentinos, the Moxes, Voodoo Boys, the Aldecados, and also the Wraiths. V cannot be part of any of these gangs as he is a mercenary. Gangs see mercenaries as people that do it for the money and not actually for the cause. So V will never ever be accepted into any of these gangs. But when playing, you can collect special content by completing jobs for these specific gangs, and you can start to build up a working relationship. Moving on to point number 10, mega corporations. And we have already spoken a little bit about these already, but the mega corporations are multinational companies that dominate the cyberpunk landscape. They can range from simple media corps to worldwide security firms. And you have to remember with these mega corporations that they will kill anyone that stands in their way. The corps in this world are often seen as sovereign nations of themselves and use their power to change the world around them. Because of the power that is up for grabs within this world for corporations, this has led to 4 different corporate wars, all of which involve different corporations for different reasons. Some of the types of corporations that you can get are media corps, agricorps, manufacturing, computing, augmentation, armed forces, services, and banking. The mega corporations just have control over absolutely everything. Everything that you would do on your day-to-day life, mega corporations will know about it. Next up, we have the weapons of Cyberpunk. This is something that we're all going to be using when playing this game, and weapons are incredibly in-depth. I spoke about them very briefly when we were talking about customization earlier, but this deserves its own category. Weapons are broken down into a few different segments. You have power weapons, tech weapons, smart weapons, cyberware, melee weapons, and throwables. And for your weapons being power weapons, tech weapons, and also smart weapons, they can vary from common weapons going all the way up to legendary. All of these can be obtained by doing certain missions, or you can just find loot in and around Night City, as well as maybe you could just go over to a vendor and just buy a weapon if you really want to. Your legendary weapons are harder to come by. What this will actually involve you doing is making a tough decision, because what you would find, and what CD Projekt Red have said, is that characters and main characters that can have impact on the story do have legendary weapons, and you have to make the tough decision of whether or not you spare that character because you like them and you want to see the content that comes from them, or you would have to kill that character so that you can obtain that weapon. And the choice is entirely up to you. You can also get modifications and attachments for these weapons, which can dramatically change how that weapon operates. So there's a lot of different stuff. One thing that you're probably all going to be looking out for, and probably the biggest selling point with Cyberpunk, is the cyberware. With this, there is different grades of cyberware. You can get a huge variation which benefits V. This can be broken down to defensive cyberware or offensive cyberware, and depending on your playstyle would depend on what type of cyberware you'll be looking to buy into. But there's a lot of different stuff here, and you can get a huge variation in the type of loadout that you want to be rocking with. Next up, we have the branch in dialogue. So just like what I said at the beginning with life paths where you get to decide, you can also make these choices just within dialogue, which can alter the game or change up different content, or even just change up the conversation. The example that CD Projekt Red have given us, and they have thrown it around quite a bit, but it still sounds cool, and it's also the reason why it just shows the benefits of this remaining as a first-person game, is that you will be talking to an NPC, and all of a sudden another NPC will walk in and interrupt you. It's at that point you have the choice of being in first person whether or not you carry on looking to the NPC that you're talking to, in which you'll get a different line of dialogue, or you have the option to look at that person that interrupted you and then have a completely different line of dialogue. This will bring a huge amount of variation to gameplay. And whilst we're on the subject of this, we might as well take it to point 13, which is the multiple endings. CD Projekt Red have confirmed that there are multiple endings for Cyberpunk, and this tends to happen when you have a branch and dialogue system within the game, because then you start to get a branch narrative, and if it did all somehow link together with just one ending, then it really didn't matter which choice you made in certain situations, because at the end, it just resulted in the exact same thing. But it has been confirmed that Cyberpunk does have multiple endings. Now we're going on to the last 2 points, and this is more looking to the future of once you've completed Cyberpunk, what next? So for number 14, there will be updates for Cyberpunk 2077. CD Projekt Red have confirmed that there will be 2 major expansions coming to Cyberpunk. There will also be free DLC released with the game. Nothing has been confirmed of the type of DLC, but people are speculating that the free DLC which will be released would be the different types of weapons, maybe different character skins, maybe different contract missions, few little small quests, maybe other different customization options. Whereas the 2 major massive expansions which will be coming to the game, those will be paid expansions. So this would be very similar to what happened with The Witcher 3. But nevertheless, there will be updates and future single player content that will be coming to the game. And then finally, point number 15, multiplayer will not be coming to Cyberpunk 2077, but there will be a separate AAA project of Cyberpunk multiplayer. This has been a massive talking point within the community, and there is a lot of confusion behind it. A lot of people believe that you'll be able to buy Cyberpunk 2077, and as a free update, there will be multiplayer added in the future. This is not happening. Cyberpunk 2077 is a single player role-playing game, and will remain that way. The updates that we're getting, as we just previously mentioned, will be single player updates. But alongside this, what's in production right now, and CD Projekt Red have confirmed it themselves, is a completely separate AAA project. And a separate AAA project is Cyberpunk multiplayer. And this isn't looking to come out anytime soon, it's penciled in for 2022, and that so far is the only information that we have about it. So you can look forward to a Cyberpunk multiplayer, it's just not coming as a free add-on to Cyberpunk 2077. It'll be a completely separate game, which depending how they monetize it, you may need to pay full price to get access to the Cyberpunk multiplayer, but you're also talking about it being at a very, very high standard because everything within this game is just dedicated to it being a multiplayer game. So there's pros and cons about it depending which way you look at it. So it's coming, but it's not coming to Cyberpunk 2077. But anyway, that is 15 things that you probably should know before buying Cyberpunk 2077. As said at the beginning, if you do want any more information about any of these topics, there's links in the description down below to some of the previous videos that we've done where we go completely in depth about these exact topics, and we just talk about the facts, some of the speculation, and we clear everything up. So if any of that does sound of interest, links to absolutely everything is in the description down below. As well as what's in the description is links to Twitter, Instagram, Twitch, and also the Discord server. So if you're interested in any of that, links can be found in the description down below to those as well. But anyway, I hope you guys did enjoy. If you did enjoy, don't forget to leave a like and subscribe. But for now, I'm going. So see ya.